emotions are not positive or negative, good or bad. They're simply pleasant or unpleasant. Emotions are. And sometimes they feel good and sometimes they don't. When they feel good, typically it carries with it a reinforcing energy of some kind. It's reinforcing what we're doing or telling us that, hey, keep doing this. Or there's a satisfaction, a contentness to our perception of life and the external reality matching that perception. And we feel good about it, right? When things are aligned. When there's an unpleasant feeling, it typically indicates that there needs to be a change in perspective, right? We may need to change the way that we're looking at something. Our perception of life may not match the external reality. So either we can change our perspective and how we're looking at it, or we can take an action to solve a problem that would make the external reality reflect to our internal perception of things. Which one is the right way to go? It depends on the actual situation. Sometimes in life, there are things that you cannot actually change. So just as an example, if a loved one passes away, there's not an action that you can take to bring them back to fulfill your perception that they shouldn't have passed away. So in that sense, a change in perspective would be required because, again, we want to keep in mind the dichotomy of control from Epictetus and keep in mind that there are certain things that we can control and certain things that we cannot. And if we want to take an action to change the reality, we need to make sure that that action is within our control. And having that sense of discernment to be able to know that in that moment in time. So when we have that unpleasant feeling, let's use it as an indicator that either there needs to be a dialogue for a change in perception, or we need to come up with some kind of action and execute in order to solve the problem that has triggered this unpleasant emotion. That could be a conversation, or that could be some kind of a tangible action that we're doing in order to move ourselves from the problem into the solution. So emotional awareness, keep in mind the emotions are not good or bad, but they are simply pleasant or unpleasant. Now, one of the biggest problems that we have with emotions is that for the most part, we don't allow ourselves to feel emotions. And some people may think that they're feeling their emotions, but there are various ways, and I've come up with 4, that people actually avoid feeling their emotions. So before I actually get into this, I'm going to jump to our next section just for a moment, because this is how I really learned this. So if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you'll have remembered the episode that I made when I found out that I had a herniated disc and I had this back injury. Now, I've had chronic pain in my back since I was 11 years old. So it's been like almost 20 years of back pain throughout my life. So for as long as I can remember, I've had this pain in my back, and it's always been something that I carried with me that has bothered me time and time again. That's, come in waves, in and out, sometimes very severe, sometimes very mild, but always lingering there. Now, physical pain is a really interesting thing. It is at least what I've come to realize, that physical pain is actually a great teacher. And I had this pain in my back, and I had always wondered what it was, right? I had done a lot of exercising, massage, physical therapy, stretching, everything like that, and it would never go away. So chronic pain, interestingly enough, according to Tad James, who he'd passed away recently, but he was the creator of timeline therapy and timeline techniques. Tad James talked about this, and timeline therapy and timeline techniques are something that are part of the structure of the liberation session I do with people when I help them to accomplish a lifetime of therapy in a day. And one of the things that Tad James talks about is chronic pain. And chronic pain is really interesting because what he had said about it is that chronic pain that lasts more than 8 weeks is often emotional. It's not physical. And the reason being is because the body knows how to heal itself, provided that there's nothing in the way, and the body will do its thing. However, if the body decides to hold on to pain, chronic pain is really and truly chronic dissociation of emotion. It's something that we never let ourselves actually feel, which is the reason why we continue to experience pain. So instead of feeling the emotion that we've judged, that we've demonized, that we've said is so bad, what we do instead is we hold tension in specific parts of our body. Now, for me, it was in the L5-S1 disc on my left side. Now, what's really interesting about this is that before I was able to alleviate my chronic pain, I had been doing a bunch of exercises, a bunch of stretches every single day. I'd changed my whole workout routine. Like everything the way I operated my entire day completely got transformed and changed when I got the news of this. It was a hit on my identity because I was somebody who trained twice a day. I was always going beast mode, like I had referenced earlier. I was redlining my body, and I wore that as a badge of honor. And when I got this herniated disc, it kind of turned all of that upside down because I couldn't, I was in pain all the time at like an 8 or a 9 almost every day in my lower back. And this went on for about a year. Some parts more intense than others. But point is, I had this pain, and all the back pain in general started when I was 11. But I had it, at this point in my life, maybe this was probably like 6 or 7 months ago, where it was like really, really bad. And when I had this pain, I remember talking to a friend, and she was telling me about this idea of where we hold certain emotions in our body. And when I told her L5S1, she had said to me, she said, "Oh, that's interesting. I read something recently that L5S1 is unexpressed anger, or it's linked to unexpressed anger." So I thought this was really interesting, especially weighing it against what I had learned from Tad James and the NLP and timeline therapy techniques. And when I thought about chronic pain is chronic dissociation from emotion. So I thought, what am I dissociating from? What emotion am I actually not allowing myself to feel? And when she had mentioned that, I'm like, well, what anger have I not allowed myself to feel? And what was really interesting is that when I began to meditate on this, out of nowhere it hit me. I realized where that anger was coming from. And for the first time, I actually felt the emotion that I hadn't let myself feel. And from what I gathered, it was something that I had felt since I was a kid. And I was actually experiencing anger towards my own mother for getting sick and for passing away. Now, as a kid, and even saying that as an adult, what's crazy about it is it seems so wrong to be angry at somebody for getting sick, to be angry at somebody for dying. It seems preposterous. And I felt guilty my entire life as a way of covering up my anger. Now, what's interesting is as I do this work on myself and I reflect, is that guilt was covering up anger, and that guilt was causing me to engage in a delusion of performance all the time, because I was always operating from a place of guilt, that I was bad. Something was wrong with me for feeling that. So I wouldn't allow myself to feel the actual anger, and instead I started operating from guilt my entire life as a way of covering that up. And as a result, I had physical pain in my body. But the moment I realized that I felt anger towards my mom, and I was able to accept that within myself and allow myself to feel that, two things happened. Number one, the anger actually dissipated. It came in and it went. It's not something that I held on to and I dwelled on, and I was sitting there upset at my deceased mother for passing away over 20 years ago. No. The moment I felt it, I remember getting very, very present to the feeling, forgiving my mom, because obviously this is something that was out of her control. And for, a 5 or 6 year old, when this developed, it's something that I couldn't comprehend. So the moment I actually felt it now at 30 years old, I was able to feel it, release it, forgive my mom, and forgive myself for even feeling that, for that matter. And upon doing that, the next day that I woke up, I had zero pain. It was gone. Now, I had also been doing a bunch of exercises and changed my whole routine, like I was saying, to support this process. But the last little bit, the last 10 to 20% of the pain wouldn't release until I had that realization. And so one of the reasons why I tell this story is because of its importance and what it points to when it comes to our actual physical pain. Physical pain can be an incredibly good teacher. After I had done this on myself, I did it in a few of my liberation sessions with some of my clients, where we started with their oldest pain, their chronic pain. And I remember one of my clients was really, it was mind-blowing what had happened during that session. She had a pain in her left trap that had been there for 15 years, and she didn't know why. No matter how much physio or massage she did, it wouldn't go away. And we sat with it for about 2 hours, going through the process that I use for chronic pain with people. And not only did her pain go from a 7 to a 0 within 2 hours, but it also revealed the most important breakthrough that she needed in her life to actually be able to allow herself to feel happy about her accomplishments and achievements. And this is a woman who's achieved an incredible amount in her life and who is admired by countless people, and yet wouldn't allow herself to feel happy or like she was deserving of that happiness because of the root of that pain. And once she allowed herself to feel the emotions that were rooted in that pain, all of it dissipated. It went from a 7 out of 10 to a 0 within 2 hours. And she also was able to actually feel happy about what she was doing, actually feel content and fulfilled. So our pain can be an incredible teacher as it points to some of the deepest emotional wounds that we have. Now, the reason why I bring this story in before I talk about how to actually feel your emotions and how to have an integral awareness of it is because oftentimes we may not feel an actual emotion, but what we are feeling is physical pain. Because what the body does to avoid feeling is it does pain. It triggers chronic pain. It triggers pain somewhere in our body where that emotion is actually being held. And if we're feeling it consistently, if it's a pattern, then it's covering something up and it's worth exploring.